Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our winter webinar series. For you all who haven't joined us in the past, my name is Andrea Davis. I am the International Programme Manager at the Civil Service College, and I am joined by the fantastic Angela Blacklaw, who is going to, of course, be delivering this afternoon's session on building strength for tough times, developing your resilience and well-being. And this afternoon's session will last around 1 hour, and we want to try and make it very engaging. We want everyone to participate, ask questions. When you can think of a question in your head, please use the Q&A and chat function. That's what it's there for. If there are any technical glitches at all, if you can't hear me at any point, or if you can't hear Angela, just simply put it in the chat box or the Q&A box, so you can hear us more clearly if needs be. So yeah, if we could just move on to the next slide, please, Angela, that would be great. All right then, so who is the Civil Service College? What do we do? Where are we based? We are an independent training organisation that offers training solutions to the UK civil service and the wider public sector. We have delivered training to not just central government departments, such as the Cabinet Office, DEFRA and DWP, but also devolved administrations like the Welsh Government and of course our NHS, as well as local authorities. And we are based right in the heart of Whitehall, so in Westminster, London. So when travel does permit, please do come along and say hello. Okay, thank you, Angela.
All right.
And if you can hear a funny noise in the background, it's our coffee machine making a funny noise there. So sorry about that. So around the world, we don't just work in the UK, of course, we work internationally as well. So you can see here where our various contacts are and our clients and so on. So if you are tuning in from around the world, a big hello to you. And just to let you know that, again, when travel permits, please do come to the UK and have your training with us in London. But not only that, we can actually send out our trainers like Angela to your country if there are any training requirements that you would like to have in your organisation. So please do get in touch with me if that is something you'd like to talk about. Okay, thank you, Angela. All right then, so as you can see here, these are our course categories and services. So we deliver around about 70 to 80 different types of courses, ranging from accountability and governance to leadership and management, professional development, policy, law and legal, media, digital and data, finance and commercial, and our brand new category, which is equality, diversity and inclusion. So today's webinar will fall under the more of the professional development category. So as it's only 1 hour, if you do want to find out more information about this particular webinar, and if you want Angela to perhaps speak with you about what she can offer you in terms of a half a day or full day course on this, I'm sure she would be very happy to answer any questions at the end, or you can contact me directly about that. Okay, thank you, Angela.
Okay. Oh, that's me.
Then, so as you can see, again, there's Angela's lovely face. So as mentioned, today's session is building strength for tough times, developing your resilience and well-being. So Angela will be delivering a session where we will look at 3 key objectives: understanding what resilience is, where it comes from and why it matters, considering what happens during the tough times when our resilience is challenged, and finally looking at practical steps we can take to build and develop our resilience and well-being. So as you can see here, Angela has been a civil servant for 25 years. She works around leadership development consultancy and also a musician. So yes, fantastic skill you have there. You're going to sing us a song later on, Angela?
No, I don't think you deserve that. It's fine.
Yeah, and of course she's got a master's dissertation on resilience, which is perfect. So Angela, would you like to kickstart this afternoon session?
Love to. Thank you very much indeed. Yes, I was a civil servant for 25 years. I left about 9 years ago. It was a brilliant run, but it was time. So today we're looking, as we said, about 3 things. What is this thing we call resilience? What happens when we go through the tough times and our resilience is challenged, because it is for everybody? and looking at ways that we can actually build our strength, build our resilience and our well-being so that we can go through those tough times a bit better. And I will say I have been interested in resilience really since 2001, so almost 20 years now, when I started off working at the Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries and Food, or MAF as it was known, before the merger with Environment formed DEFRA. And I don't know if you recall, those of you from the UK, but 2001 was the foot and mouth disease crisis, the biggest civil emergency in the UK until COVID happened. And I saw what the impact was on civil servants across the department who were called in to do work that they wouldn't normally have to do. Things like cleansing, which is a euphemism for burning cows, and so on, dealing with angry and suicidal farmers. So looking at those civil servants, some of them fell apart, and I do not blame anybody for doing so under those extreme pressures. Some of them seemed unchanged. They just sort of bounced back. Some of them actually seemed to grow and thrive and apply for promotions and get them and took flight. And I was so interested that that's what I did my master's dissertation on. Personally, I've been through times in life when my resilience was high and I was doing really well against life's challenges. And I've been through times when my resilience was low and I really struggled with things like nervous exhaustion and so on. So I'm going to address each of these things by talking for 10 minutes or so and then opening up to the floor for 5 minutes of responding to questions before we dive in a bit. I may ask, therefore, from time to time for a bit of chat box input. Please do go with that. Let's kick off. So understanding, first of all, what resilience is, what personal resilience is, rather than organizational. We are facing a global crisis. There's no doubt about that at all. And our resilience as a community, as a society, as a global entity is really challenged. We face illness or the fear of illness. We may have lost people that we loved. We may feel guilt that we have lived and others have not. We may have lost our job or face losing our job or our income or the certainty of employment. We have lost contact with people, including the sense of touch. We have not hugged nearly as many people perhaps as we might normally do. The oxytocin that gets created through hugging. We may face mental health repercussions because of loneliness and isolation. Now, I could go on and on. These are extraordinarily tough times with abnormal and extended pressures. Many people have come across not just this wonderful man, but a quote from him as well. He said, "The greatest glory lies not in never falling, but in rising every time we fall." So even if we set aside education or experience or training, a person's level of resilience is a key factor in determining who succeeds and who fails. This is true for healthcare outcomes, for sport, for the boardroom, for the office. And I'd like you to think for a second about the most resilient people you have ever come across. Now, whether they're famous or not famous, it might be Nelson Mandela, it might be your Auntie Jean. But if you can maybe drop a few names in chat and tell us in what ways did they show that they were resilient, and maybe how did they become so? We might have a chance to go back and look at some of those when we stop for questions. So please, I would love to see a few examples in chat box. Meanwhile, I will continue talking. Now, resilience is something we draw upon all the time. It's not just putting up with awful things happening. It's about finding a better way through them. If plan A doesn't work out, we can usually be flexible and fall back on plan B or plan C and so on. But sometimes it's tested to the extreme, either because there's a single huge event or because, so many events have happened. We all have our dips. Resilience can help us to recover faster, though, and perhaps to learn from the experience as well. So here we go. There's a definition of resilience by some consultants called Robertson Cooper, who are very big in this field. Being able to sustain successful performance and positive well-being in the face of adverse conditions, and to recover from or adjust easily to misfortune or change. So it doesn't mean never falling, but how quickly can we rise? Resilience is sometimes associated with bouncing back as though we were made out of rubber and we just would always return to our previous shape. But major life events change us. We learn and we grow and we develop from experiencing them. They are transformative. And we sometimes think that, oh, you know, I've got to tough it out. I should have some kind of heroic superpowers in order to get through difficult times. Well, resilience doesn't mean we're going to sail through life. It means that we can manage our way through it. We are going to have setbacks. We just are. Resilience is how we can come out of it. So where does it come from is our first question. And this notion here that resilience develops, some say from trait, that you're born with it. It's your genetics. Well, that would stuff the rest of us up, wouldn't it, if we didn't have the right genetics? Some say it is protection. We grew up in an environment that was nice and warm and comfortable, and therefore we believed that people were intrinsically good and we trusted them. But what if we didn't have a brilliant start in life? Well, happily, there is a third source, our ability to learn through difficulty. These are sometimes known as crucibles. We're going to come back to this later on. Challenging and intense and unplanned and transformative events. So, okay, we know, therefore, what resilience is. What are the components of it, though? What is it made up of? The first is confidence. If we're confident, we can stay calm under pressure. We are realistically positive when we face the reality of a situation. We can stand our ground when we're challenged, and so on. Here's an example of somebody who's remarkably confident, Malala Yousafzai. Now, you may remember this girl. She is a Pakistani education advocate, and at 17, she was the youngest person to win the Nobel Peace Prize. And she became an advocate when she was very young. She was targeted by the Taliban for speaking out on girls' education. She survived an assassination attempt and has continued to speak out confidently on the topic of girls' education. The second component is this notion of purpose. You know, do we know what we want to achieve? Have we got drive and direction and duty and self-discipline? Are we clear about what matters to us? Maybe we have a religious faith, or we have deep humanistic principles. Here's an example of somebody with great purpose, Viktor Frankl. He was an Austrian psychiatrist and a survivor of Auschwitz. And at one of his lowest points, when he felt most degraded, when he felt his life was trivial and brutal, he realized he had to find purpose in his suffering, so that he imagined himself giving a lecture after the war on the psychology of the concentration camp to help other people understand what we went through. A third component here, adaptability. Can we flex to situations that are beyond our control? Are we open to imagination, to curiosity? Are we open to new thinking rather than staying attached to the past? Ralston, I'm sorry, it's a very bad picture of him when it gets blown up there. I couldn't find a better one. But he was a chap who was hiking in Utah, Colorado, in the US. A boulder smashed his left hand and then crushed his right hand against the canyon wall. He had told nobody about his plans, and he had no way of calling for help. He didn't have a mobile phone that was functioning. After 3 days, he ended up amputating his trapped right arm. He did something that is unbelievable, unthinkable, to cut off a part of your body in order to survive. He saved his own life by being adaptable. And the last one here, social support. This notion to which we need to reach out to other people. If we think that resilience is all about ourselves, we're wrong. We need others. We need relationships with them. There's an old phrase that says, no man is an island. And that's very true for resilience. So how sociable are we? Are we spending time with family and friends? Are we reading the cues to understand what's going on for other people? It's very important for us to offer support as much as to receive it in terms of resilience. Nelson Mandela, let's bring him up again, because he was a remarkably resilient individual. 27 years he spent in Robben Island, isolated from family and friends and traditional social networks. But he and other prisoners, and you see the quarry that he was working in there, they created something that became known as Robben Island University. And when they were working together, when they were at lunch, they discussed their different views and what they knew about each other year after year. So they not only kept their mental muscle alive, they stayed in a social network. Now, our resilience levels go up and down throughout our lives in response to the challenges that we face. And what you might like to do after this webinar is spend some time thinking these 4 factors, and yes, we will send slides out afterwards. These 4 factors, where are they showing up in my life right now? What's strongest, and what maybe could do with a bit of attention? I'm just going to breathe there for a minute. That's a data dump. We're covering a lot of ground in a short time, but I'm curious to know, are there examples or questions that people have on the data dump that I've just dumped on you there?
So please feel free to use the Q&A box, the chat box for the first part. We're going to do a Q&A after each section. But at any point, if you've got any questions throughout the presentation, feel free to just pop it in the chat box there. But Angela, earlier on you were talking about so kind of like people in the public eye being resilient. Someone actually put in the chat box Jeremy Corbyn. I don't know if anyone else has got any. Just feel free to type away and just put in a few more examples in there of who you think's resilient. But yeah, Jeremy.
Definitely. I'd love to hear from Michelle and Belinda. I'm not disagreeing with you, but what is it about Jeremy Corbyn that makes you particularly think, yeah, Michelle, Belinda, either one of you, feel free to unmute and tell me.
Diane Abbott.
Yes, absolutely. Diane Abbott has been through so much. Does everybody know who Diane Abbott is, I wonder? Lamide, do you want to say something about her career and what she's faced? Lamide?
No.
Hello. Okay. Yeah, she's, if anybody doesn't know her, she is a Black woman politician, and she has faced a lot of exclusion in her life, a lot of aggression and so on. And it has been extraordinarily, maybe you're not allowed to unmute. Sorry about that. Maybe we have you on permanent silence. Belinda, yes, Corbyn has remained consistent to his principles. Yeah, we may or may not agree with Corbyn's principles, but there is no doubt. Yes, Belinda, same applies to Diane Abbott. She's absolutely, the woman has a mission, and that has pulled her through some extraordinary resistance that she has faced. Yeah, I think I've just realised that everybody, probably apart from me and Andrea, is on forced silence. So sorry about that.
To listen to our voices.
Exactly. Sorry about that, people. Here I'm inviting you to speak and it's not possible. Anything else you want to just clarify before we move on to the next part about these 4 components of resilience?
Does anyone struggle with any of those components? I wonder. Is there anyone that feels more strongly than others?
While people are perhaps typing that, I will say I think social support is very difficult in these challenged circumstances.
Yeah.
In COVID time, the ease of social support that you might have at work or with family or at church or whatever is very difficult. Jess, yes, normally you can be very resilient, but this year has tested that. Oh, Nikki, what an interesting question. Can you be over resilient? In my book, no. If resilience is generally being purposeful and having social support and being adaptable and being confident, then I would say, no, I don't think it's possible to be over resilient. It might be possible to be so focused on your own needs that you're not thinking about other people's needs. That would be a risk factor. Belinda, social support is different for everybody. Yes, they do. And social support for some people, if we think even just about the personality difference between introverted and extroverted, somebody with a more introverted preference, they need perhaps fewer relationships, but they run deeper. Somebody with a more extroverted preference, I put my hand up to that, may have more relationships, but they may not run as deep. So yes, it could be multiple, it could be deep, but it's very much about personal preference and need there. Yes, Chris, I think you're right. Can you still be resilient without this, or with minimal? It's possible, Louise, if the other factors are really big. If you are super confident and super full of purpose and super adaptable, then I think you can get by without social support. But there is no doubt that it is a huge part of resilience. So I think, yeah, and McKenna is saying become more resilient during our new normal times. Yeah, and there's a very good reason for that, McKenna, which I shall come on to in our third part. Yeah. Yes, it can sometimes be difficult. Chris, is social support different from support from colleagues? No, I'd say support from colleagues is part of social support, which could also include family and faith and other forms of community. Somebody said, what was my instrument? Actually, it's my voice, and I'm a songwriter primarily and a producer. And a huge amount of community that I've missed tremendously is the social support I get from my fellow vocal collective members. I sing with about 20 other people, and I miss them dreadfully at the moment. They're a big part of my social support. Yes, Naomi, a simple text can be super helpful. And we are social. Yes, most of us are social, Belinda. There are exceptions, but we are fundamentally social animals, just as dogs are, or chimpanzees are, or whatever. We are not cats so much, which tend more to be non-social animals. I think some people are just sending replies to panelists and not panelists and attendees. Yes, I think you're quite right, Maggie. That is what's happening. Yeah, but if you can send to panelists and attendees, that will be wonderful.
Right.
I better crack on.
Yes, brilliant.
Okay, so we've looked at what resilience is, but let's look at what happens when we're really tested. Oh, no, that was clever. Never mind. When it's challenged. Now, in situations of stress or pressure, our brains produce a number of hormones, things like adrenaline and noradrenaline and cortisol and so on. Now, in nature, this stress response system, and when our blood pressure goes up and our breathing increases and so on, it's usually self-limiting. It's time limited. Once the perceived threat has passed, so let's say it's a tiger or whatever, once the tiger's gone, everything returns to normal. And as our adrenaline levels drop, our cortisol levels drop, our heart rate reduces, our blood pressure goes back down, and all our systems go back to normal. Now, when we're at our most resilient, interestingly, these hormones disappear faster. When we're less resilient, we keep feeling that sense of psychological threat because we still have all those stress hormones going around in our brains and bodies. And when we're resilient, we do something else. We release a lot of dopamine. Dopamine is one of the feel-good hormones. It's a neurotransmitter related to reward and pleasure and gratification, which is very helpful for us when we face adversity because it boosts our attention and our memory and our mood and our creativity. So something to bear in mind is that when we are chronically stressed and anxious, our brain stops releasing dopamine. So no matter how strong we are or how much we've learnt, not any single one of us is immune. We can all be knocked sideways, particularly by something that we don't expect. And there are times when resilience is tested for so much that we don't function well anymore. Our thinking becomes less flexible. Our emotions pop up when we least expect them, and they're harder to control, which has an impact on our confidence and possibly on our relationships and therefore our results. And we might see a number of behavior changes. We might start to avoid certain challenging situations. We might put things off and procrastinate. We might find ourselves becoming unusually pessimistic, or notice our levels of confidence dropping. We may be more emotionally volatile than usual, or we can withdraw from others. We might get stuck on a single solution to problems. We might stop exercising. We might use drink or food or mindless TV or drugs as a way of soothing ourselves. And every person is different. It'd be interesting maybe to pop into chat box here what you have noticed about yourself since the first lockdown in March. What might your friends or family notice about any changes that you've noticed in yourself? I remember a period this year, it's been a difficult year for me as well. I've lost members of my family to COVID and so on. I remember a stage during this year, I became very pessimistic, and that is very different from my normal way of being. Now, when it comes to thinking, human beings are probably the smartest. I mean, you could maybe say there's a whale or two or a dolphin maybe who's just about as smart as humans, but we're super clever. And our brain comprises about 2% of our total body weight, but about 20% use of energy and oxygen. We've probably got something in the region of 86 billion brain cells, and it's 73% water. So even a tiny bit of dehydration can seriously affect our attention and our memory and so on. We've got 5 senses to take in information about the world, far more than we can process. So we often take shortcuts in our thinking. That's usually okay, but when our judgment might be a bit dodgy, if we've got a lot of adverse events going on, our faulty thinking, our shortcut thinking, can sap our resilience. And it turns out that there are a number of different thinking traps, if you like, that we can fall into. These are fairly predictable thinking traps that stress can bring us into. One, I'll just run through them super fast. Jumping ahead, where we take a single bit of data, but we kind of extrapolate it into having a much wider meaning. We could go into partial vision, where we only look to see what's wrong in our environment. We might start using the wrong lens. We just focus on what's not okay, and we forget what's going well. We might be making things very personal. Even we've got no direct influence over something. That makes us feel helpless. We could start externalizing and blaming other people for what we have done. It kind of gives us a false sense of comfort and provides an excuse for staying stuck and not doing anything. We could start overgeneralizing. Oh, this always happens to me. You always do this. Oh, a kind of faulty crystal ball, forming judgments about the character traits of somebody we're dealing with. Oh, I know what you're thinking, and so on, instead of focusing on behavior. We might start mind reading. Oh, I know what you're thinking. I know what's going on with you. Or emotional reasoning, assuming that the emotions we feel are accurate indications of what's happening, because they might not be. We might start to magnify things, minimize things, catastrophize things. There's so many ways that we can break our own thinking process. And I wonder if there are any of these that you might recognize in yourselves over the last few months. Now, these thinking traps can become habitual and unconscious. So we might need to put some effort into recognizing them in ourselves. Just one more thing I want to consider before we have another break for Q&A. And that's the interplay between self-protection and empathy. This is also something that can be under pressure when times are difficult. And this research goes back to 1960. One researcher was trying to understand why nurses were resigning from their profession in such huge numbers. And frankly, even however many years we are later, 60 years later, this is still an issue that we find in the NHS. In the case of the nurses in 1960, they found that the fear of death and destruction was pretty rampant. There was a lot of bad stuff that they were dealing with. So they developed unconscious defenses against those routine anxieties. Now, these were people who went into the field because of their natural compassion for human suffering. And they wanted to alleviate it. But those defenses against anxiety led them to behave in very thoughtless and routinized ways. So instead of Mrs. Patel, who has a kidney problem, and she's over there in bed for, Mrs. Patel is a grandmother and an accountant, or whatever else Mrs. Patel is, she became the kidney in bed for. She was reduced to something that was not quite fully human. So when people cannot bear what situations make them feel, they sometimes switch off. They withdraw all their sensitive and tender feelings and protect themselves. And the work that the Francis Report did in investigating mid-staffs, for example, they found some very similar phenomena there. But it's not limited to nurses. We see it in people who work in institutions, who care for disadvantaged people, like teenage delinquents or prisoners or the learning disabled or the elderly and so on. These folk who take care of other people are at risk of burnout. And if they do, the risk then is that they become insensitive, offhand, or even uncaring, God forbid, brutal, because they're protecting themselves and it can leach away at empathy. So again, my question to you, to what extent might you be at risk of being drawn into compassion to the degree that you may find it hard to protect yourself, or to switch off to protect yourself from those that you deal with and what they might be feeling? So lots of thought there. I'm going to stop for a wee while again, Andrea, and just pick up on comments and questions.
So I think it's from Lamede at the top. It's easy for me to stay in my room all day when usually I'm always up and about. Jess, less optimistic than usual. Karen, weirdly far more relaxed about being housebound than I thought it would be.
Yeah, maybe it's liberating, Karen. Yeah.
So Belinda, my natural cynicism has gone into overdrive. Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's one here from Paula, it's a longer one. In my case, the changes were not visible in the first months. I think I adapted quite well to the new way of life and even found some advantages. But when I got COVID, it all changed. I experienced loss of memory, brain fog, anxiety, fatigue. These were not symptoms as they continued after I healed and are still there. I'm sorry to hear that, Paula.
Yes, I'm sorry as well. I hear you. Yeah, many my members, my family members have had COVID. I've had it as well, and there may be an element of biological impact there. Actually, there is something of fatigue that can follow COVID, but even then, as you say, things like brain fog and so on could be as much to do with the times we're living in as the illness that you suffered. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I'm experiencing that as well.
Yeah.
Naomi, just in case, she's on her daughter's laptop.
Yeah, that's all right. That's all right.
I do lack empathy, always have done, but I found my lack of empathy is getting stronger.
Yes, McKenna, and this slide here about self-protection and empathy maybe indicates why that might be. These are difficult times, and our impulse may be to look after ourselves before looking after others. Okay, yes, hope to see you soon, Wendy.
We'll send you the slides and the recording as well.
Yeah, we will do, Wendy. Michelle, I think I like boundaries and endpoint. Yeah, me too, Michelle. Yeah, it's hard. It's really hard. My mother is absolutely there with you. My mum is not doing very well at the fact that there is no end point. We can't say, it'll be all right by the 14th of February, Mum, don't worry. We can't say that to her. And the ongoing stress of that has been very significant for her. I agree. Any questions on what we've covered so far? Is there anything you want to ask about this last section around the kind of hormonal things and the thinking traps? And
remember, there is a Q&A box along with the chat. So for any questions, if you want to put it in the Q&A box, if we don't answer it right here, right now, we'll always answer it as well. So please feel free to ask any questions throughout. That's absolutely fine. But yeah, we've had some great comments in, so thank you so much for sharing those.
Yes, it helps so much, guys, when you throw opinions in. It's super. I love it. Thank you very much. My resilience is good, but my tolerance levels of others have got lower. Yes, Lisa, it's really tough, you know. We need to give ourselves a little bit of a break on this sometimes, and exercise a little bit of forgiveness, that we are not always going to be the best, most perfect expression of our perfect selves under this degree of ongoing stress. And it is the ongoing nature of it that is particularly significant, not just the stress, but the ongoingness. Yeah, I agree. Okay, shall I dive into the third part then, and then we can have a bit longer at the end for some convo. So this, oh, there we go, Q&A again. See, I keep forgetting the Q&A slide. Such an amateur, right? So the third part of this, and maybe this is what you've been waiting for as well, is how do we build and develop resilience and well-being? Well, let's expand on a notion that we referenced at the very first part of what we were saying today, and that's resilience is not just a byproduct of our genetics or our upbringing, although there is, you know, it is there in the mix, but we can develop it through a process of learning through difficulty. And we call these things crucibles. Crucibles are times that are challenging, intense, unplanned, and therefore transformative. And we need these periods of high pressure in order to develop the skills to deal with high pressure. You can't develop the skills to deal with high levels of pressure unless you are under that. It's not something you can kind of learn without being under that. But we do need to take the pressure off as well. I don't know if anybody uses weights in the gym, but the principle is pretty much the same. Oh, that's some dreadful. Oh, it's pixelated. I'm sorry about that. But hopefully if you squint, you can see that those are people working out at the gym. So when we're using weights at the gym, we've got sets and reps. So maybe we're doing 2 sets of 15 reps on a particular thing. And that tears apart our muscle fibers, actually. When we're doing that, our muscle fibers disintegrate a little bit, which is why doing the sets and reps is not the only part of this. We also need a period of recovery, which is why your trainer will generally tell you to wait at least 48 hours before going back and exercising that muscle group again. We need that period of recovery for the muscle fibers to heal, and they heal in a stronger way. That's how muscles are built, literally. And we call that process supercompensation. It's like an oscillation between energy expenditure and recovery from spending that energy. And, you know, weightlifting isn't always an analogy for life, but it's quite a good one in this regard. The key to personal resilience is exactly that: being under pressure, trying really hard to deal with it, and then stopping and recovering before trying again. And if we spend more time in that high performance zone, then we need to spend more time in the recovery zone afterwards. Otherwise, we risk burnout. When we say that modern living is increasingly stressful, actually, the problem is more that we lead quite relentless lives, always putting ourselves under a degree of stress, rather than that oscillation between stress and recovery. Do you remember there was a nasty little meme that went around at the start of lockdown that said, if you haven't learnt Turkish or discovered how to basket weave or whatever during lockdown, then it proves that you never lacked time, you only lacked motivation. And I'd love to give that person a punch in the nose. Because really what we need to do to compensate for the stress we're under with lockdown is relax. Now, research has found that there's a direct correlation between lack of recovery periods and decreased resilience. And just because work stops at 6, it doesn't mean that we're recovering. We might spend the evening thinking about solutions to work problems. We might talk about our work over dinner. We might fall asleep thinking about tomorrow's workload. So we may need to act far more decisively in order to make space for a meaningful recovery. And one of the things that resilient people do to make sure that they have got things other than work in their lives, and actually I just see Wong Yi there, is have more prayers. Yes, that's one thing that we can do. Another is to make sure there is just something in work, other than work, in our lives. And a secondary passion is very good for that. Alison Mowbray, you may or may not recognize the name or the face, but she is a rower. She won a silver medal in 2004. But she became a very accomplished pianist over exactly the same time period because it gave her a secondary passion. So when she wasn't training, rowing, she would turn her attention to music instead. And they say a change is as good as a rest. And yes, there's something in that. There's a lot of talk about well-being as a function of resilience. Now, sometimes the concept's a bit hard to pin down. It's actually a very straightforward thing. Our well-being is made up of how we feel and how well we function. And this is very fascinating research indeed. There's a couple of great reports on the website of the New Economic Foundation. And rather than being a sort of guru sitting on a hilltop saying, oh, this is a really good way to live your life, they did some evidence-based research into what made people feel well and function well. And they came up with, these are the 5 top things that came out in no particular order. The first was to connect, and that goes back, does it not, to this notion of social support. So to connect with people around you, your family, your community, your neighbours, your colleagues, your dog or cat for that matter. Finding out how somebody really is. Investing a bit of time each day in building these relationships. And there's something particularly powerful about constructive self-disclosure. So to share appropriately what's troubling you and make time for somebody else to share that as well. The second is to be active at whatever level suits your mobility and fitness. So even people who are wheelchair bound can do, let's say if they cannot move the bottom half of the body, they can move the top to some degree. For some people, this will be training for a marathon. For somebody else, it's going for a walk in the woods. But at whatever level is appropriate for your health and level of fitness. The third there, to take notice, to notice the world around you. Maybe it's a vivid sunset one day, or the softness of your cat's fur. Maybe it's something beautiful or unusual. Maybe it's as simple as a different route to work one day. But they don't use the word mindfulness. But frankly, this is mindfulness. This is mindfulness in action, being aware of the world around us. The fourth is to take notice, to keep learning, to explore something new, maybe go back to an old interest. So to play the viola, or to cook snail porridge, or to learn Swedish. Now, we said before that, we don't want a sense of guilt around it, like that meme at the beginning of lockdown, or it just proves you don't have dedication. It could be just as simple as learning to make, I think Nigella suggested double buttered toast the other day. Well, maybe it's as simple as trying a different thing with your toast. But new skills, new changes, we can make physical changes in our brain by the learning of new skills. Then the last one is to give, to look outside yourself and do something nice, maybe for somebody you know, maybe for somebody you don't know. It's remarkable what that does hormonally to us. It creates all sorts of feel-good, morphine-type hormones in our bodies when we give to somebody else. So this stuff isn't rocket science, but all the evidence is that it actually works very well to boost our sense of well-being. And even if well-being isn't quite the same as resilience, it helps. Our last major point here really is, what else do resilient people do in order to learn? One thing that they do is reflect on what experience has taught them. And this can include thinking about when you have been resilient in the past. So it might be, you might want to think of a time in your life when you believe you were quite resilient then, actually. And it was a difficult time, but you did well in it. So you might want to think about that as I go through these points. One thing to ask yourself is, what skills did you draw upon? That might be, I don't know, I learned to laugh in the face of disaster, or I learned to manage money. One point in my life when my now husband, then boyfriend, was particularly rubbish with money, I hid money in the potpourri. Where you couldn't find potpourri. I mean, shows how long that was ago. I can't remember last time I saw potpourri in anybody's house. I used to hide it in there. And you never knew that I kept money there. So each week we would have enough for our groceries. That was a skill I learned at a tough time. What strategies did you draw upon to keep yourself going? Now, this might be weekly massages or volunteering, or I schedule time for daily meditation and I tick it off because I like ticking things off. I tick it off when I've done, and that gives me a sense of achievement there. Support. We've talked about this many times. It could be social support, but also religion, belief, yoga practice. With my father dying this year and my mum developing dementia, I have talked to a lot of friends, and my mindfulness practice has become incredibly important. And lastly, what words of advice have given you comfort and wisdom? Maybe something that your grandmother used to say, or some song lyrics. I don't know, like Paul McCartney, when I find myself in times of trouble, Mother Mary comes to me. Or a quote from somebody you admired, or some wise words drawn from your own experience. For me, it's the Buddhist philosophy that nothing lasts forever, that this too will pass. Those are words of advice that really resonate with me. So I'd say thinking about previous times when you have been resilient can also give you some lessons to take into the future. Right, that's been a fairly breathless spin through the topic. I'm actually going to stop sharing at this point.
Yeah.
And let's just focus on thoughts and ideas and questions for the next 8 minutes or so.
Yeah, so chat box. Let's have a look at this chat box. I'll have to make that bigger somehow. Just one moment.
Yes, Wongi talked about prayer. Absolutely, it's mindful, it's support, it's a relationship with a deity. Beautiful. Yes. Daily fresh walking in the woods. Karen, there is evidence also, I haven't really covered it today because there's a limit to what we can cover, but in terms of what gives us peace and happiness, being in things that are bigger than ourselves. So nature is it's huge.
Yeah.
And it's very soothing.
Yeah, I'm definitely a certified rambler these days now. I walk more than ever, and that's definitely helped me through the tough times. Yeah, for sure. So
agree.
Yeah. Someone mentioned a befriending service earlier. Yeah, wonderful thing to do. So well done you.
Yes, Mandy and Rachel also, she said she's volunteering with a charity to support lonely elderly people by being a telephone buddy. Amazing. I love that.
Just learn how to ride a bike.
Yes.
Well
wonderful.
What else can we see here? There's a few quotes here. Well, a few words of wisdom, I guess. Control the controllable. Control the controllable.
Yes. And then let go the rest.
Don't waste time worrying about things outside your control. Focus on what you can control.
Love that, Belinda. That's great. Lamide also, yes. I do hope I'm pronouncing your name right, Lamide. Do my apologies if I'm not getting that right. Ian, hybrid meaning working in office too, as it gives you face-to-face contact. Yes, I know. I miss being in a room with people. Oh, good, excellent. Oh, Michelle, yes, decluttering. Decluttering is fantastic. Now, for some people, you can't see, you can see only the curated bits of my office. I've actually got quite a cluttery desk going on here, but it is very good for clearing the mind and a sense of achievement also, which it basically ticks the same things as learning a new skill. We get a sense of achievement from doing it, like you did, Chris, when you learned to ride a bike. Paula, one should focus on what is most suitable. Yeah, I agree with you, Paula. You know, because otherwise you then get a sense of guilt about, oh, you know, I should be doing this and so on. Start where it's comfortable. Now, if you can find activity that tick off multiple of these things, like, for example, walking in nature, you've got being active and you've also got the taking notice at the same time, because you can go, oh, look at the daffodils and isn't that nice, and I can hear a cuckoo and so on. And we've got tick, that's two at once there. The reason I miss my my choir colleagues so much is that we do all of these five. We do every single one of them. We connect with each other. We are family to each other. We take notice, because when you're singing, you have to work out exactly, where am I in this harmony? Am I in the right place? To be active, singing's hard work, guys. Physically it is, and we may have movement in there as well. So, you know, 4-hour rehearsal is a workout basically. We are always learning new arrangements and new songs and so on, and give. Not only do we do work for charity and so on, but actually give to each other as well in times of need. So all 5 of those factors were kicking when we were together, and now it's a virtual connection. It's a bit harder, but we keep pushing. So is there anything that we have not yet covered? Does anybody wants to know?
Yeah, we've still got a couple of minutes there. Even if you want to start thinking about some questions for Angela as well, again, that Q&A box is there, or if you prefer to use the chat box, that's fine. Angela is obviously here to answer any questions that you may have in terms of your, you know, strategy around resilience and well-being and so on. So please feel free to raise any questions if you can think of anything at the moment. We still have a few minutes to go. So that's absolutely fine. So yeah, Angela, I don't know whether, whilst our audience is thinking of a few questions, if we just go on to my slides for one moment there.
Of course, yeah, sure thing. Give me a wee sec, actually, just to make sure I picked it up from the right place.
That's fine.
So
I'm guessing that's your slides done with there.
Yeah, pretty much. There were a couple more, but
yeah, no, go for it. That's fine. We can go back to that before we move on to my section. That's no problem.
Well, I tell you one thing I will share, which is this quote here. Share. There we go.
Yes.
Lovely. So this notion here, that change leads to disappointment if it is not sustained. So the person who was saying one thing at a time, yeah, absolutely. Transformation is sustained change, and it is achieved through practice. So practicing, thinking back to times when I was resilient, what were my skills? What were my strategies? Those 5 factors of well-being, you know, sustaining it. So rather than going, right, I've got to learn Norwegian and how to fix a bike, and I need to learn to make brownies as well, just do one thing at a time, so it's sustainable. Otherwise we don't transform, and that's BKS Iyengar. Now, this, I think, was your slide.
Yes, thank you very much. So I can see there's a question that's came through here, so we'll answer that first of all.
Okay.
Angela, great session, thank you. Does Angela have any more upcoming webinars, which we will touch on in a second? Actually, thank you very much for that question. We'll touch.
Great question. Love your question.
That was a great question. Thank you. So just as part more webinars, I just want to say thank you so much to Angela for taking part again in one of our webinars this afternoon. She's done 1 or 2 for us before in the past, and we'll touch on more of the work that she does do very, very shortly. But for our newbies who have joined us today, please do sign up to our training alerts at www.civilservicecollege.org.uk to keep up to date with all of the webinars that we are running for next week and in January, February and onwards, do check out our website. Angela, what I wanted to touch on as well, if you wanted just to talk to our audience about our new e-learning feature that you are taking part in. So Angela, you just want to explain to the audience what it's about?
Yes, indeed. This is really exciting. It's the first time that I've done e-learning of this kind, which is it's known as the difference that makes the difference in business, emotional intelligence. So emotional intelligence is the degree to which I understand myself, the degree to which I understand people and the world around me, the degree to which I can then control myself so as to build the highest quality relationships. And it is through those relationships, unless you work exclusively in a cupboard, my guess is that relationships is what really gets us the best possible results. Yeah. And so the e-learning that I've been working with Civil Service College on doing is a way of exploring that in e-learning. So I've got a few videos as part of that. I'm voicing over some slides, been designing it with an external company. I'm really excited. And it's a highly affordable way of getting into emotional intelligence.
Absolutely, yeah, and I think we're hoping to launch that in January, so next month. So please, yeah, check out our website, keep up to date with us. Fingers crossed it'll be launched by January time. But yeah, it's been fantastic to take part in, and the content is brilliant. And Angela, obviously, you're fantastic in it as well. So do check our website to find out more. So if you could just go on to the next slide, please.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, so as mentioned, we do try to run our webinars on a weekly basis, especially from January. I think we've got from January up to around February, March time. But the next 3 that are coming up is next week, Thursday, the 17th of December, managing reactions to change in a COVID world. That is with our trainer, Wyn Williams. And then into the new year, the first one of 2021 will be on Wednesday, the 13th of January. That will be how to get your voice heard in meetings with our expert trainer, Jo Cliff. So she's actually delivered a few webinars for us before in the past. And Tuesday the 19th of January, we've got Keith Bleasdale, who will be delivering a session on leading with impact and purpose. So please do sign up to our alerts or check out our webinars and register for those. They should be, fantastic. Our trainers are great. And I think it's the first time that a couple of our trainers here have delivered webinars for us before. So maximum participation would be brilliant. So if we could just go to the final slide, please, Angela, that would be great. Thank you.
Oh, that's it.
Oh, another click, I think. It's a funny one.
There you go.
Thank you. Okay, so this is our social media handle. It is at cscollege.org. We are on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and of course, this recording will be put on our YouTube channel. So if you just check out your emails, you should get a follow-up email, hopefully early next week. You will get the slides and the recording, which you can pass on to your contacts and your colleagues and whoever else. Please feel free to do that. Again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my email address, or if my colleague Chris could do that, that would be great. If you've got any questions and related to the content that's been delivered today, please feel free to contact me directly. Angela does a whole range of different bits of training for us, and not just the webinars and the e-learning. She does full day sessions, half day sessions. So if there's any questions in relation to the content that you've seen today, you can come to me and we can talk about what Angela can do for you going forward. And again, Angela does travel as well. So when travel permits, I'm sure she would love to come and see you.
Oh, I've missed travel, please. Yes.
I know it's been a funny one, but fingers crossed 2021 we'll be on that flight. So but I just want to say thank you so much to our audience. You've been fantastic as always, and Angela, it goes without saying, you've been brilliant as well. Thank you so much. Hope you've enjoyed it.
Thank you for everybody. I know it's not been easy.
Yeah, and have a lovely Christmas and take care.